king of the monsters, Godzilla. His roar has become an icon of cinema history, and over the 65 years that the atomic reptile has been around, we've gotten multiple variations of the famous His rival in Godzilla King of the Monsters, King Ghidorah, may not have a roar that's as distinguishable as the G-Man's, but nonetheless, when you hear the eerie screeches and screams of the devil with 3 heads, you know all-out chaos is about to begin. In this video, we will go over the history of King Ghidorah's roar. Residents, this is Jacob, and let's get to it. The original Showa era of Godzilla movies was something that Godzilla King of the Monsters took a lot of influence from. However, the chilling noises made from King Ghidorah from this time period are still to this day highly unique. How many franchise villains go beep, 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 beep? Exactly my point. The classic chirps of the Showa era Ghidorah still hold up to this day, and the high-pitched noises that are heard sound something like sped up laughter. This roar was downright eerie, and it fit the vibe of the 60s and 70s very well. One of my favorite noises from this Ghidorah is the static-like sound that can occasionally be heard. To me, this sounds a lot like cicadas, the bugs you hear sometimes during the summer. Another animal from our real world that the Showa era Ghidorah sounds can be compared to is that of dolphins. The chattering back and forth between dolphins has a lot of the same squeaks and changes in pitch that you can hear with the Showa Ghidorah. Overall, the Showa era King Ghidorah roar is still one of the best, and I'm sure that many of the classic Godzilla fans agree. In the Heisei era of Godzilla films, Ghidorah's roar took a drastic change. While it may not be as nostalgic and memorable as the Showa roar, the Heisei Ghidorah roar was certainly more threatening and loud. Bigger monsters, bigger roars. This is what the Heisei era was all about. Instead of the sped up laughter sounds, Ghidorah now would release ginormous shrieks and squeals. While some of the original chirps were thrown in, you can hardly hear them under the thunder of Ghidorah's new roar. One thing that can be said about the Heisei King Ghidorah roar is that it's not as unique as the other versions of the monster, almost sounding like they took Godzilla's roar and just played around with it until they had this. This, however, is not a bad thing. The Heisei era roar is still one of the better kaiju roars out there, and something I think the new Monsterverse Ghidorah took a lot of influence from. Yes, Mecha King Ghidorah was part of the Heisei era, but since the monster is not specifically King Ghidorah, I'm going to leave it out of this video. Sorry. Come with me, and you'll be in a world of your imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in the world of my creation. We'll see, we'll defy explanation. The Rebirth of Mothra 3 was the first time we got to see both the Ghidorah from modern times as well as the monster in its younger days, way back in the time of the dinosaurs. We talked about that in this video right here, so feel free to check it out after this video. The modern Ghidorah in this movie had by far the most going on in its roar to date. It was loud and deep, and in my opinion, it showcased Ghidorah's immense size more than the high-pitched chirps and screeches from the monster's past appearances. This roar also had a lot of animal influence, as you can hear more growls and snarls with this version of Ghidorah. Now let's talk about Cretaceous Ghidorah, the previous mentioned Ghidorah in a much younger state. This roar is truly something else. I mean, really, I'm pretty sure that's Orga's roar, but just edited to be more high-pitched and fast. Outside of that, the roar of this monster is a bit unsettling. It takes a similar route as the modern Ghidorah and uses animals in its design, like what I presume to be an elephant right here. Overall, the moans and shrieks of this Ghidorah definitely give it a memorable sound. So the Ghidorah seen in Godzilla GMK was kind of a wanker, but luckily its roar didn't have the same problem. This roar is actually one of the first times you can actually tell that there are 3 separate heads all making noises. The past Ghidorahs always had a roar that sounded mostly like it was coming from just one of the heads, so this was a great feature for this Ghidorah. The roar had elements of both the Showa and Heisei versions, but also managed to make it much more creepy. The roars of GMK Ghidorah almost have an enchanted, mystical-like sound to them, which makes sense in the regard that this movie had a much more spiritual vibe than most of the other Godzilla movies out there. Just imagine being woke up in the middle of the night and this is all you hear. Just like with Godzilla from the anime series, Ghidorah in the Godzilla anime, the Planet Eater, used a lot of the classic roars of the monster from the Showa and Heisei periods. To make it different, the designers modernized the sound of this roar by adding in some electro flair. They used the sound like static created by electricity to help give this version of the monster that other dimensional sound. Overall, it was a bit freaky sounding. King Ghidorah in the new Godzilla King of the Monsters movie once again delivered some fantastic sound effects and roars. I won't get too much into detail with this one since the movie's still new, but just for a heads up, it's awesome. You can tell it was influenced by the classic roars, but it was mostly a brand new take on the 3-headed monster's roar. Most importantly, the high-pitched screams and cackles made a return, and the animal's growls, along with the other frequencies that came from the monster, delivered what may just be the best sound design for this monster of all time. Unfortunately, I was not able to find out how exactly Toho or Legendary designed the roar for Ghidorah, so if any residents know this info, let me know in the comments. Ghidorah's roar may not be as famous as Godzilla's, but if you are a Godzilla fan, you know exactly what this sound means. Make sure to like and subscribe, and go watch Godzilla King of the Monsters in theaters while you still can. This is Jacob, and peace out, residents.